Hello, hello. We're here, not in the room, not in the car, outside, in a beautiful park, on a beautiful sunny day. So today it's a bit different. I got out of the apartment, and I'm here to make a video on A Confederacy of Dunces. Whoop. By John Kennedy O'Toole. Large print edition. I don't know. My print was pretty small on the Kindle, but this is Confederacy of Dunces. Now, this was written by John Kennedy O'Toole, an American author. First, on the title, A Confederacy of Dunces. This title comes from a quote by Jonathan Swift. Jonathan Swift was an English writer active in the 18th century. He wrote Gulliver's Travels, The Tale of the Tub, quite a few other stories. He was in the same vein and movement as, who is it that did that Dante's Inferno translation? Oh my gosh, my mind, I'm losing it. Did he do the translation? No. Never mind. But he was an 18th century English writer. And on one of his essays, he wrote, "When a true genius appears in the world, you may know him by this sign. The dunces are in confederacy against him." The dunces. Dun dun dun. So, Alexander Pope was his name, by the way. Got back there, yeah. So kind of at the same time as Alexander Pope. John Kennedy O'Toole. He's a writer from Louisiana. He doesn't have much of a bibliography. And that's partly due to the fact, it's really due to the fact that he took his own life at 31 years old. He was distraught with the fact that A Confederacy of Dunces was not going to get published. He felt like his literary career was stagnating. Otherwise, he was an incredibly brilliant young man. I think he enrolled in university at 16, became a professor around 24, 25, so he achieved quite a lot of milestones quite early in his life. And he wrote Confederacy of Dunces about that time that he was a professor, or he was a lecturer. But he couldn't get it published. People weren't reading it really. They weren't really going to help him out to have it published. And later in his life, he started to become much more erratic and ended up taking his own life. The failure of not having A Confederacy of Dunces published really haunted him. But after he died, his mother found the manuscript, and she then took on the task of trying to get it published. And about over 10 years after his death, around 1980, it was finally published. They corresponded with a university professor who really saw what a great novel this was. And it was published and subsequently awarded with the Pulitzer Prize. Pulitzer Prize is pretty much the primary American specific literary award. Now, Confederacy of Dunces, what's this about? Well, this follows the story of Ignatius J. O'Reilly, who is a monstrously large, he's described as elephant-like, man-child. He's a man-child. He's 30 years old. He's quite educated. He has a graduate degree. They make that known. But he can't hold a job. He is completely at odds with the world. He is grotesque. He is tacky. He is pugnacious. He insults pretty much everyone. Everything in the world seems to be an affront towards him, attacking him. That's how he sees the world. So Ignatius goes through his life in a quiet, I should say quiet despair. It's definitely a loud despair, a loud dislike, misanthropy, um, uh, dislike for humans, dislike for the world. He feels that American society has lost geometry and theology. He has a strong inclination towards a strange medieval-like, his assumption of a medieval-like religious society. He believes that we should return back to that world. He considers the Enlightenment and everything that followed that to be an abomination. This is quite similar to many fringe or far right ideologies that we see propping up now. That the Enlightenment is actually an issue. So he takes much more comfort, has much more comfort in, finds much more comfort in these old medieval philosophies and ideologies. In particular, the scholar Boethius was an early medieval scholar. I think he's really from the Dark Ages. And Boethius plays, his works, his writings play an integral role in Ignatius's worldview. In fact, one of Boethius's books, I think it's called the something of philosophy, the constellation of philosophy, something to that effect. Whoa, maybe you can hear the train coming down. You're going to hear a lot of ambience, a lot of that park ambient. So this book by Boethius, it impacts not only Ignatius's worldview, in that he draws very heavily on the concept of fortuna, this wheel of fortune, which Boethius writes about. Boethius himself was, I believe, condemned to death when he wrote this large philosophical work that Riley is constantly referencing. I feel bad that I forgot the name of this book, but it's something to the effect of the constellation of philosophy. But what does that even make sense? The something of philosophy. But this book, this physical book, actually has a role in the story. It's passed around a bit. Riley lends it to someone, and this person kind of loses it at the time, and he freaks out. But this is such a phenomenal romp. This is such a comedic and fun, engaging book. It is quite grimy, quite gritty. There's a real comic book element to it. It's not just comedic, but it has this kind of grimy, gutter-like feel to it. And O'Toole really depicts New Orleans, from what I understand, in this kind of dirty but at the same time very colorful and bright style. I need a bit of water. Another one. But Ignatius, this man-child, he, as I mentioned, he's at odds with everything in the world, essentially. And in this, we see the echoes of these picaresque novels, in particular, Cervantes' Don Quixote. Once again, a character, Don Quixote, who is completely at odds with the world that he's living in, who does not accept the world that he's living in and tries to impose his own reality onto the world. And that, in effect, in Don Quixote, has an effect on the world. I have not finished Don Quixote. I've read part 1 twice, but I have yet to read part 2. Someone told me, gosh, that's such a big book to reread the first part over and over again. Yeah, it's a great book. It's a good book. But I will finish part 2 of Don Quixote. But we find that a character that is at odds with the world. There are other characters like that, characters that seem to be born out of this world, not really a part of this world, and they're at odds with it. Perhaps in some sense, Zorba the Greek also inhabits that constellation. So, what else are we to talk about? However, while this is quite a comedic and comic novel, and as far as the dialogue and Ignatius's insults and how he describes things, it's so rich. His language is so rich. But O'Toole doesn't just make Ignatius rich. All the other characters, the side characters, who become a bit of a web around Ignatius. And Ignatius's pugnacious attitude and just his self-destructiveness ripples through to these other characters and these subplots until in the end they all kind of merge into one in the climax. However, while this is a comedic novel, a comic novel with many funny insults, funny occurrences, what is it about? Let me get to that first of all. Well, essentially, Ignatius, he's a man-child. He can't hold a job, and he's living with his mother. His father passed away 21 years ago. So his father passed away when he was 9 years old. That's very, very early. There is the element, the theme of... When I talk so much, I need to drink water. I'd never be a public speaker. Man! There is the element of fathers and mothers and what they do to our lives and needing a father figure, especially as a man. Ignatius makes reference to that he needs a father figure. And when he first manages to get a job in this narrative, he really latches on. I shouldn't say latches on, but he ponders whether his boss could be a father figure, could be construed as some sort of almighty king for this new world, because he has to twist everything into his medieval mindset. But Ignatius really needs a job now, and that's what this sort of narrative is about, because his mother has crashed their car. His mother's an alcoholic, and she essentially rescues him, we can say, from one of his misadventures at the start of the novel. And then she, having drunk quite a lot of alcohol, crashes their car and damages a property. So now she owes quite a lot of money. So Ignatius has got to get his ass in gear and get a job. And at first it seems like it goes well. He gets a job, and it's a decent job. However, things go awry, and he essentially he attempts a sort of quasi-crusade rebellion, all kinds of religious imagery that he tacks onto this, and he gets fired for that. So he's got to find another job, and he ends up finding another job later as a hot dog vendor, much to his mother's chagrin. What are you doing now? Selling weenies? We're never gonna pay We're never gonna pay off that bill with those weenies. You selling the weenies? And while he's working at the hot dog stand, he pretty much eats hot dogs most of the time. He barely makes any sales or makes any money. And his employer catches on to that. He's like, oh, okay, so you barely made any sales, but 5 hot dogs are missing? What happened to that? Yeah. However, while this is quite a comedic story, comedic novel, and I found it hilarious, and it's not just Ignatius, but many of the other side characters are quite funny on their own, such as Patrolman Cuso, who is a police officer who essentially has to arrest shady-looking people. He has to kind of accost shady-looking people. and this goes wrong. He accosts Ignatius, and then an old man who wasn't really doing anything wrong. He tries to arrest this old man, and his sergeant, his superior, reprimands Patrol Mancuso for just arresting people who aren't doing anything wrong. And by reprimanding him, he forces Patrol Mancuso to dress up every day as in a new costume, a ridiculous costume. He might be a clown, he might be like a ballerina dancer or something like that. He forces him to dress up like this so he could kind of better discern what a shady looking person is. Because if he's dressed up like a ridiculous person, then he won't try to arrest other strange people just based on how they're dressed, such as Ignatius, who is dressed always in this very odd outfit, this kind of plaid shirt that he loves, this lumber jacket. Although one of them, I can't remember, the plaid shirt or the lumber jacket, one of them he loses. And he always has this green hunting cap on, and he has these big whiskers, this big mustache, and he's this fat guy, described as elephant-like. So Patrol Mancuso also, ridiculous character. And the mother's funny, and quite a lot of other side characters. However, while this is a comedic story, there are significant elements to it that are worth discussing. And there are quite pertinent themes, I believe. There's quite a lot of social commentary on work and the degradation of labor. Once again, Patrol Mancuso and all sort of characters that are employed in a job seem to be taken advantage of. O'Toole highlights this, that people are taken advantage of by their employers for money, or whether they're kind of made fun of, in a sense, how demeaning work can be. There's the notion of fate as well, Fortuna's wheel, this wheel that spins us, and sort of casts our fate. This idea that our fate has been cast before is emphasized by Ignatius. However, whether this is really the case or whether Ignatius is really of his own demise, and it seems that O'Toole is highlighting that Ignatius is someone who sort of precipitates his own demise, who creates this demise and creates this belief that perhaps his fate is already cast. But how you look at it, I suppose the Stoic element, how you consider the events that are unfolding to you, that very much can impact your life. Because I do feel like Ignatius, many of the events that happen are quite trivial to Ignatius. However, everything seems to be the end of the world. There is a sort of notion of the apocalypse in this narrative. How every slight, every little failure seems to be an apocalypse or the end of the world to Ignatius. And it does give this subtle feeling, this apocalyptic, almost millenarian feeling to this story. Now, desire, sex, and urges. This is, I believe, quite an important theme that many people don't touch on. There's a character called Myrna Minkoff who is consistently in the background. However, she is someone who Ignatius corresponds with. She's someone who he, I want to say bonded with. To say bonded with is true, but at the same time, there's an antagonism that they have towards each other. Because once again, Ignatius is so pugnacious, so antagonistic to everyone that to say he has friends, it's almost impossible to see this guy as making friends. However, he does bond with Myrna Minkoff, who is this sort of hyper, what we could describe as this beatnik, hyper individualistic, but at the same time very uh, uh, virulent activist. She's almost like a sex positive activist. Uh, she would be bordering on the people that the CIA would have a dossier on, because she would be, she is looking to sort of overthrow the U.S. government in many ways, and has found quite a lot of issues with the government and society because of that. But he corresponds with her, and she sort of ignites within him, it seems, this urge to become a bit more invested in the social politics of the world, in unionizing, in kind of creating social movements. And Ignatius sees some of these social movements. He's not a social person, doesn't like people, but he is not against trying to rally people behind some odd cause that he believes will propel the United States to glory, or at least accelerate this downfall of glory into a new era. A race is also quite a pertinent theme, and how O'Toole is quite consistent, it seems, that on the theme of work, that African Americans are being abused as far as work, as far as their workers' rights. There's a odd passage, a very funny passage that I kind of like, but a telling passage in which Ignatius he wishes that he had been born black in some ways, because then he could be a bit of a monstrosity to the middle class, and that he could terrorize other white people much better. And he would live in a very, very poor cot in the slums somewhere with his mother, and that he wouldn't really have to care to amount to anything, because society would kind of already have condemned him to an unambitionless life. And that's very telling of perhaps the social atmosphere during the 60s in which this was written. Modernity and consumption. It's clear Ignatius is quite against modernity, but at the same time he consumes quite a lot of fast food, hot dogs, stuff that he laments as being degrading to the soul, like fast food. He would he would gladly go listen to and watch music and movies that he considers degenerative and an affront to the human spirit, just so that he can rouse a sort of negative emotion, and he will yell, "Oh gosh, what degeneracy is this? You know, this person." And there's always a very sexual sheen to Ignatius's. I shouldn't say always, but very often there's a sexual sheen to his insults, especially towards women. And here the element of suppression, sexual suppression, comes through. I think Oedipus and Freud are mentioned in this story. I know Oedipal link is mentioned in this story, and there is a significant Oedipal link between Ignatius and his mother. This link starts to wither, though, as it becomes clearer throughout the narrative. One, that Ignatius's mother is going to marry another man. Two, that it becomes clear Ignatius can't hold even a weenie job, a job selling weenies. And three, as Ignatius seems to develop a link, a stronger link between him and Myrna Minkoff. Now, initially, their relationship is described as platonic but kind of odd, almost pansexual. It's very I should say it's asexual in many senses, but they're drawn to each other through, I think, a mutual antagonism to the world. And as the novel progresses, this link starts to seemingly become stronger and stronger and stronger. And that coincides with the Oedipal link that Ignatius has with his mother. It starts to become weaker and weaker and weaker. So yeah, this and that goes to the theme of the suppression of the sexual urges by Ignatius. There is a sort of sexual tension and element throughout this novel. But what a brilliant, brilliant story, incredibly comedic, I think quite socially insightful as well, and one that, I'm really saddened that this author, O'Toole, had to take his own life, and couldn't write. I'd be really, we are really, we're really going to miss all his output that he could have produced. But that is A Confederacy of Dunces by John Kennedy O'Toole. I hope you guys enjoyed this. Have a great day.